Commander Alex Stone stood at the edge of the smoldering rebel base, breathing heavily through his helmet. His eyes scanned the wreckage of what had once been a stronghold for the rebel forces on the planet Centra. The mission had been dangerous, and the odds had been stacked against him. But Alex had never been one to back down from a challenge. His orders had been clear: infiltrate the rebel stronghold, rescue the princess, and get out. Simple, or so it seemed. The rebel leader had been ruthless, a force to be reckoned with. The battles had been fierce, and the destruction had been widespread. But Alex had pushed through. He had fought hard, stayed focused, and completed the mission. The princess was safe, and now he just needed to get back to the rendezvous point. But even as he looked around at the devastation he had caused, he felt a twinge of unease. He had never liked the idea of leaving a place like this in ruins. Still, his job had been done. As Alex moved toward the clearing, he noticed the young woman standing in the shadows, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light of the destroyed base. She was tall, her posture regal despite the disarray around her. Her clothes were torn, but she stood with a certain dignity that made her appear untouchable. Even in these circumstances, she seemed to exude an air of calm strength. It was Princess Zarella, the heir to the throne of Zenthra. Alex had never met her in person before, but there was no mistaking who she was. "Commander Alex Stone," the princess said, her voice carrying through the air, strong yet tinged with relief. "I can't believe you actually found me." Alex stopped in his tracks. Her voice was soft but steady, and he could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She had been through a lot, more than he could imagine. Still, there was something about her that drew him in, something that made him want to protect her. "I did what I had to," Alex replied simply, his tone flat and professional. "You're safe now. Let's get you out of here." Zarella nodded, though her eyes seemed to linger on the surrounding destruction. "How did you manage to get past the guards?" The rebels had set up traps everywhere. Alex offered a small, almost imperceptible smile beneath his helmet. "I know how to work my way through enemy lines. It's what I do." The princess didn't respond immediately, but Alex could see the hint of admiration in her eyes. He was used to the respect that came with his position as a commander in the human military, but there was something different about the way she looked at him. It wasn't just gratitude, it was something deeper. Something that Alex couldn't quite place. As they moved toward the waiting shuttle, Alex couldn't shake the feeling that this mission was far from over. He had been sent here to rescue Zarella, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized that there was a lot more at stake than just her life. The fate of Zenthra was tied to her, and he had just dragged her out of the hands of a group of rebels who wanted nothing more than to see her dead. The shuttle ride back to the royal palace was long and silent. Alex had never been one for small talk, and Zarella seemed content to sit quietly beside him. She was exhausted, her head leaning against the window as she stared out at the stars. The weight of the mission had clearly taken its toll on her. After what seemed like an eternity, the shuttle finally touched down in the grand courtyard of the royal palace. The guards who had been waiting for her quickly surrounded the craft. As the ramp lowered, Alex stepped out first, his hand resting on his blaster as he scanned the area. The tension was thick in the air. The Zenthran royal family was powerful, but even they weren't immune to the dangers that lurked in the galaxy. Princess Zarella slowly made her way down the ramp, her eyes scanning the palace grounds. She had grown up in this place. But Alex could tell that the last few days had shaken her. He had no idea what it must be like to be in her position. He couldn't imagine what it felt like to be a princess always surrounded by duty and responsibility, constantly fighting for survival. "Thank you, Commander," Zarella said softly as she looked back at him. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come for me." Alex nodded, but didn't respond. It wasn't necessary. He had done his job. It was as simple as that. The royal court was a vast and luxurious space, filled with ornate tapestries and intricate carvings that depicted the history of Zenthra. As they walked through the grand halls, Alex could feel the weight of the palace pressing in on him. It was a place of immense power, and he was just a soldier, a mere pawn in a game far larger than himself. But for now, he was here on duty. He had done his part, and he didn't need to think about the complexities of court life. At the end of the hall, the massive double doors to the throne room opened, revealing Queen Solara, the ruler of Zenthra. She was seated on her throne, her expression cold and calculating. Despite her regal appearance, Alex could tell that she was no stranger to power and the sacrifices it demanded. "Commander Alex Stone," Queen Solara said, her voice commanding and sharp. "You've done well in bringing my daughter home. For that, I am grateful." Alex stepped forward, his posture straight and respectful. "It was my duty, Your Majesty." Queen Solara's eyes studied him carefully, as though weighing his worth. After a long moment, she spoke again, her tone softer this time. "Because you saved my daughter, I want you to stay by my side." Alex froze for a moment, surprised by her words. He hadn't expected this. The request wasn't a command, but there was a certain weight to it that made it clear he wasn't being offered a simple favor. She wasn't just asking him to remain as her daughter's protector. She was offering him something more. "I don't understand, Your Majesty," Alex replied. "I did what was asked of me, but I'm not sure I belong here." "You may not understand now, but you will," Queen Solara said, her voice calm but firm. "Your skills, your loyalty, your strength, these are qualities that can serve Zenthra well. I see something in you, Commander, something that could be invaluable to my kingdom." Alex shifted uncomfortably, not sure how to respond. He wasn't used to being in the presence of royalty, let alone being offered a position by one. He had always been a soldier, trained for combat, not politics, and yet here he was, standing before the Queen of Zenthra, being asked to become something more. Zarella, who had remained silent up until this point, spoke softly, her voice filled with hope. "Please, Alex." "Stay. We need you." It was the princess's words that made him pause. She had placed her trust in him, and now the queen was asking him to do the same. For a moment, Alex considered his options. He could walk away and return to his life as a soldier, continuing to fight in the wars that seemed to never end. But something about this offer, about the kingdom of Zenthra, called to him. Perhaps this was his chance to make a difference, not just for the princess, but for an entire people. "All right," Alex said, his voice steady. "I'll stay, but only because I believe in the future of Zenthra." The queen's gaze softened slightly, a faint smile crossing her face. "Good. I believe you will be a valuable asset to us, Commander." Commander Alex Stone's first days in the palace were a blur of meetings and introductions. Queen Solara had kept her word. He was not just a guest, nor just a soldier who had done his duty. He was now part of something much greater, a royal protector, a trusted advisor, and an unfamiliar player in the complex political games of Zenthra. The palace was unlike anything Alex had ever seen. It was filled with strange customs he hadn't yet fully understood. In the military, everything was direct, straightforward. You followed orders, completed your mission, and that was it. Here, in the court of Zenthra, things were different. There were layers to every conversation, hidden meanings behind every gesture. Alex, a soldier trained for battle, found it difficult to adjust to the subtlety of court life. Yet he couldn't deny the pull he felt. Despite the foreignness of the royal life, there was something about it that intrigued him. Perhaps it was the strength of Queen Solara herself. The queen wasn't just a ruler, she was a master strategist, a woman who had kept her kingdom intact through years of constant warfare. She had an aura of control, of confidence, and even Alex, with all his experience, couldn't help but admire her. But it was Princess Zarella who had drawn him in from the very start. The princess, though kind and intelligent, was not a woman who seemed to welcome the title of royalty. She had been born into a life of expectations and duties, yet she seemed to have an unspoken longing for something more. It was in the way she looked at the stars, her gaze distant as if searching for something beyond the palace walls. Alex could see the weight of her future resting on her shoulders, and it made him wonder what it must be like to live a life where every decision had consequences far greater than one's personal desires. Despite their differences, Alex and Zarella had found a way to talk, to connect. They would meet in the palace gardens during the quiet hours, when the rest of the palace was silent, and they would talk about everything and nothing at all. Zarella was always curious about Alex's life as a soldier, about the world beyond Zenthra, and Alex found himself telling her stories of battles, of distant planets, of things she had never known. She, in turn, would speak of her kingdom, of her duty, of the sacrifices she was expected to make. It wasn't a romance, at least not yet, but there was a bond between them, one built on mutual respect and understanding. One evening, as they sat in the garden, Zarella asked him a question that had been on her mind for days. "Why did you stay?" she asked, her voice soft as she turned to face him. "You didn't have to." "You could have left after saving me." Alex shifted in his seat, unsure of how to answer. It wasn't a simple question. The truth was, he had been struggling with the same thought himself. He had stayed because the Queen had asked him to, because he felt a sense of duty toward Zarella, and perhaps even toward her people. But there was something deeper, something he couldn't quite name, that kept him from walking away. "I stayed because I believe in what you're trying to do here," he said, his voice steady. "I believe in the future of Zenthra, and I think you can be a part of that future. It's not just about me saving you. It's about helping build something stronger, something worth protecting." Zarella looked at him for a long time, as if weighing his words. Then she nodded slowly. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," she said quietly, "but I'm willing to try." Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of footsteps approaching. The door to the garden opened, and one of the palace servants entered, bowing respectfully before speaking. "Your Highness the Queen requests your presence in the council chambers," the servant said. Zarella stood up, her expression shifting to one of duty. "Thank you," she said, and then turned to Alex. "I'll see you later." Alex watched her walk away, his mind racing. He didn't know what it was about her that pulled him in so strongly. Perhaps it was the way she balanced strength with vulnerability, the way she carried the weight of her world without letting it crush her. Or maybe it was the fact that she was fighting for something more than herself, fighting for her kingdom, for the people who relied on her. He stood up from his seat and walked back into the palace, a part of him feeling out of place, like a soldier in a room full of politicians. He didn't belong in this world of intrigue and power plays. He belonged in the field, with his men, fighting for survival. But the Queen had asked him to stay, and he had agreed. Now, it seemed like he had a larger role to play than he had expected. The council chamber was as grand as the rest of the palace, with tall, arched windows letting in the last light of the setting sun. Queen Solara was seated at the head of the long table, flanked by her advisors and military leaders. Her piercing gaze met Alex's as he entered, and she gave him a small nod, a gesture of acknowledgement. "Commander Stone," the Queen began, her voice firm. "Thank you for joining us. We have much to discuss." Alex took a seat at the table, his mind already preparing for the conversation ahead. He had heard rumors of the threats facing Zenthra, but now it seemed he would be expected to act. The Queen had called him here for a reason, and it wasn't just to sit idle. "We've received intelligence," Queen Solara continued, "that the Tarkan Dominion is preparing for an all-out assault. They've been gathering forces on the edge of our space, and we believe they intend to strike soon." Alex leaned forward slightly, his interest piqued. He had heard of the Tarkan Dominion before, a ruthless and militaristic race of beings who had been at odds with Zenthra for decades. The Tarkan forces were known for their brutality and their insatiable thirst for conquest. "They're a dangerous enemy," Alex said. "What's our plan?" The Queen's eyes flickered to one of her military advisors, a tall, broad-shouldered man who stood to address the room. "We've already begun fortifying our defenses along the border," the advisor said. "But we need more information." "We need someone to infiltrate the Darkhan forces, someone who can get close enough to their command to gather intel on their strategy. We need to know their exact plans if we're going to stop them." Alex's heart raced. This wasn't just a small skirmish. It was a full-scale war that could reshape the fate of Zindra, and he was being asked to go behind enemy lines. It was the kind of mission he had been trained for, but this time, it felt different. This wasn't just about a battle. It was about saving an entire kingdom. "I'll do it," Alex said without hesitation. "I'll get the information you need." Queen Solara's eyes softened slightly. "I knew you would, but this will not be an easy task. The Tarkin Dominion is unlike any enemy we've faced. You'll be risking your life. But if anyone can do it, it's you." Alex nodded, his mind already working through the logistics of the mission. It would be dangerous, yes, but he had never backed down from a challenge. This was no different. Zarella, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. "Please be careful, Alex," she said, her voice gentle but filled with concern. "We need you." Alex looked over at her, seeing the worry in her eyes. He had already promised to protect her, and now he had a greater responsibility to protect her people, her kingdom. "I will be careful," he said, offering her a reassuring smile. "I'll come back." With that, the meeting continued, and Alex was briefed on the specifics of his mission. But as he listened, his thoughts kept drifting back to Zarella. She had become more than just a princess to him. She was someone he couldn't ignore. The future of Senthra was uncertain, and Alex was about to enter the heart of the storm. But no matter what happened, he couldn't help but wonder if he was truly prepared for what was to come. Alex stood in the dimly lit war room, his eyes scanning the holographic map of the galaxy. The Tarkin Dominion had been gathering strength along the edge of Zenthra's territory for months. Their ships, their soldiers, and their plans were all shrouded in secrecy. The Queen had given him his orders: infiltrate the Tarkhan forces, gather intel, and return with vital information that could turn the tide of the war. It was a mission that would take him deep into enemy territory, far from the protection of the royal palace, and possibly into the heart of danger. The mission brief was clear. The Tarkhan Dominion was planning a surprise attack, and Alex had to find out exactly when and where it would strike. With this information, Queen Solara could position Zenthra's forces and possibly prevent a full-scale war. It was a chance to avoid devastation, but the risk was enormous. If Alex was caught, it would mean certain death. He couldn't afford to fail. As Alex packed his gear, he couldn't help but think back to his first days in the palace. He had been unsure of his place here, feeling like an outsider in a world of politics and royalty. But now the weight of the mission he was about to undertake made everything else seem insignificant. He had a job to do, and he intended to complete it, no matter the cost. Princess Sorella had asked him to be careful, and he had promised her that he would. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized how deeply he had become involved in the fate of Senthra. It wasn't just about saving Zarella anymore. It was about saving her entire kingdom, her people, and her future. And that responsibility weighed heavily on his shoulders. He had always been a soldier, trained to fight, to kill, to protect. But now, in this palace, in this war, he was more than just a soldier. He was part of something much greater than himself. He was a key player in the survival of a planet, and perhaps even a symbol of hope for the future. The next morning, Alex made his way to the palace hangar, where a sleek, black stealth ship awaited him. The ship was equipped with the latest technology, including cloaking devices and advanced communication systems. It would be his transport to the Tarkin territories, and it was designed for one purpose: to help him get in, gather information, and get out without being detected. As he boarded the ship, his thoughts turned back to Zarella. He hadn't seen her since the council meeting the night before. She had been so concerned about his safety, so worried about what the mission might mean. Alex had tried to reassure her, but he knew deep down that this mission was far more dangerous than either of them realized. The hangar door slid open, and the ship lifted off the ground, its engines humming softly. The stars outside seemed distant, almost unreachable, as if they were a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the isolation that came with being so far from home. Alex knew that once he entered the Tarkin territories, he would be alone. He would have to rely on his training, his instincts, and the briefings he had received from the Queen's advisors. But it wasn't just his survival he was worried about. It was the fate of Zemthra. If he failed, everything he had fought for would be lost. As the ship passed through the outer layers of Zemthra's atmosphere, Alex engaged the cloaking device, making the ship invisible to any sensors. It was a small advantage, but in this war, every advantage mattered. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. He had faced danger before, but this mission felt different. It wasn't just a fight for survival. It was a fight for a future that was still uncertain, still fragile. The journey to the Tarkhan Dominion took several days. The ship traveled in silence, its course plotted through remote regions of space where few ships ever ventured. Alex used the time to review his mission details, memorizing the Tarkhan fleet's movements and the layout of their base. The Tarkhan Dominion was a formidable enemy, but Alex was determined. He had faced worse odds before, and he had always come out on top. This time, however, the stakes were higher. This time, the fate of an entire planet rested on his shoulders. On the fourth day of the journey, Alex reached the edge of Tarkhan space. The sensors on his ship picked up several Tarkhan warships patrolling the area. They were heavily armed and on high alert, but the cloaking device kept Alex's ship undetected. He held his breath as he maneuvered the ship through the Tarkhan patrols, careful to avoid being spotted. The tension was thick in the air as he slipped deeper into enemy territory, his heart pounding with every passing moment. After several more hours of tense navigation, Alex arrived at the Tarkin base. It was a massive facility, built into the side of a barren, rocky planet. The base was heavily guarded, with armed patrols walking the perimeter and numerous defense systems in place. Alex knew this would be the hardest part of the mission, getting inside without being detected. He landed the ship in a secluded area just outside the base, using the ship's cloaking technology to remain hidden. He would have to rely on his stealth training to get close to the Tarkhan command center. Alex checked his weapons and gear one last time before heading out. The plan was simple: infiltrate the base, gather intelligence on their plans, and leave before anyone knew he had been there. But as always, things rarely went as planned. Creeping through the shadows, Alex moved toward the base. The security was tighter than he had expected. There were more guards than he had anticipated, and they were constantly on the move, making it difficult to find a moment of weakness. But Alex was patient. He had learned long ago that in situations like this, patience was the key to success. He moved swiftly and quietly, staying low to the ground and avoiding the patrols as he made his way deeper into the base. The facility was a maze of hallways and corridors, all leading to the central command center. Alex's goal was to get inside and download the plans for the Tarkhan attack. Once he had the information, he could return to the Queen and Zemthra's forces. But until then, he had to be careful. The Tarkhan Dominion didn't take kindly to intruders. As Alex reached the command center, he crouched behind a large piece of equipment and observed the guards standing near the entrance. There were 2 of them, both armed and alert. He would need to neutralize them quietly before he could slip inside. He waited for the right moment, watching as the guards chatted among themselves. The conversation was in Tarkhan, a language Alex didn't fully understand, but the tone was casual, and their attention was not focused on the door. With a swift movement, Alex closed the distance between himself and the guards. silently taking them down one by one. He moved quickly, ensuring neither of them had a chance to alert anyone else. The whole process took less than a minute, but Alex knew that every second mattered. He entered the command center, a large room filled with advanced technology and communication equipment. The Tarkan officers were busy monitoring the situation, but they didn't notice him immediately. Alex set to work quickly, plugging into one of the terminals and downloading the data on the Tarkan attack. The information was encrypted, but Alex had dealt with encrypted systems before. His hands moved over the console with practiced ease, breaking through the security layers one by one. His heart raced as the files began to transfer. This was it. This was the moment that would determine the fate of Zenthra. Just as the download was nearing completion, the alarm went off. Alex cursed under his breath. He had been too slow. The Tarkan base was now on high alert, and Alex knew he didn't have much time. He grabbed the data files, stuffed them into his bag, and made a dash for the exit. The guards would be coming for him, and he couldn't afford to be caught. He ran through the corridors, his footsteps echoing in the silence. The base was now in full lockdown, and security was everywhere. But Alex was fast. He knew the layout of the base well enough to find an escape route. The problem was getting to it would take time, and time was something he didn't have. As he neared the exit, he could hear the Tarkan soldiers closing in. Alex pushed himself harder, running faster, determined to make it out alive. He reached the landing pad where his ship was hidden and quickly started the engines. The ship powered up, and Alex took off into the night sky, the Tarkan forces already in pursuit. The mission wasn't over yet, but for now, Alex had what he came for: the information that could save Zenthra. Now he just had to make it back home. Alex's heart pounded in his chest as he piloted the stealth ship through the dense asteroid field. Behind him, the Tarkan Dominion's ships followed closely, their engines glowing like angry stars against the dark backdrop of space. He had the information he needed, but escaping with it was proving to be a far more difficult task. His cloaking device had given him a head start, but the Tarkan ships were getting closer, their sensors able to track even the faintest disruption in the void of space. The Tarkan Dominion was relentless. They would not stop until they had him and the data he carried. The war could be decided by what he had just stolen, and the Tarkan leadership knew it. Alex's mission had always been dangerous, but now it had become a race against time. If he could just make it back to Zenthra with the data, the Queen could use it to prepare for the coming assault. But if he failed, everything would be lost. The ship's sensors blinked, warning of incoming fire. Alex swerved sharply to the left, the ship's thrusters burning hot as he narrowly avoided a volley of missiles. He cursed under his breath and quickly assessed his options. There wasn't much time before the Tarkan ships closed the gap. He couldn't outrun them, not with his cloaking device already activated. The only way out was through the asteroid field. It was risky, but it was his best chance. "Hang on," Alex muttered to himself, setting the ship on a new course that would take him deeper into the maze of rocks. The asteroid field was dense, filled with large, jagged rocks that could destroy any ship caught in the wrong trajectory. But it was also a perfect place to hide, to lose the Tarkan ships in the chaos of spinning debris. He punched in a series of commands, using the ship's advanced navigational systems to plot a dangerous but possible route. The ship shot forward, weaving between massive asteroids, the rocks passing by in a blur. Alex's grip tightened on the controls as he focused entirely on his course, every muscle in his body tense. If he made one wrong move, the ship would be shattered. The Tarkan ships weren't far behind. Alex could hear the distant hum of their engines and feel the tremor of their pursuit. They were determined, relentless in their chase. But Alex had trained for moments like this. He had lived through countless missions where the odds were stacked against him. He had been in situations where escape seemed impossible, and somehow he had always managed to survive. This time would be no different. As he sped deeper into the asteroid field, Alex's mind wandered back to the events that had led him to this point. He had started out as a soldier, a simple man with a single purpose, to fight and protect. But now, after everything he had seen and done, he had become something more. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for the future of an entire planet, an entire species. He was fighting for Zarella. The thought of her gave him strength, a reminder of why he had taken this mission in the first place. Zarella, the princess, who had captured his attention from the moment they had met. She had been strong, compassionate, and unafraid to face the harsh realities of her position. She had been born into a life of royalty, but there was more to her than just a title. She was a symbol of hope for her people, someone who could guide them through the darkness of war and uncertainty. And that was why Alex had stayed. He had made a promise to her and to Zinthra. He would not let them down. "Stay focused," Alex whispered to himself, shaking off the thoughts of the princess and returning to the present. He needed to survive this first. He needed to make it back to Zenthra, where the queen would be waiting for the crucial information he had stolen from the Tarkan Dominion. If he could just make it there, everything else would fall into place. The asteroid field grew thicker, the rocks around him spinning in every direction. The Tarkan ships were still in pursuit, but now their sensors were struggling to keep up. Alex grinned as he expertly maneuvered through the chaotic maze of rocks, using every ounce of skill he had to stay ahead. It wasn't just the Tarkan ships he had to worry about. It was the field itself. One wrong move and the ship would be crushed against one of the asteroids. The mission and his life would be over. The seconds felt like hours as Alex darted through the field, narrowly avoiding collisions with the massive rocks. His heart raced, adrenaline coursing through his veins, but he kept his mind sharp. There was no room for error. He couldn't afford to get careless now. As the seconds ticked by, the Tarkan ships began to fall further behind. They couldn't match his speed or precision in the asteroid field. They weren't as nimble as his ship, and that gave Alex the edge he needed. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Alex saw an opening. The asteroid field began to thin out, and ahead of him, the vast expanse of space stretched out before him. He had made it. The Tarkan ships were still behind, but they were too far to catch up now. Alex had escaped the worst of it. But he wasn't safe yet. He still had to make it back to Zenthra, and the Tarkan ships were not the only threat he faced. The galaxy was full of dangers, and even in the safety of his ship, Alex couldn't afford to let his guard down. He quickly activated the ship's long-range communication system, sending a signal to the royal palace. The message was brief but clear. Mission complete. Returning to Zenthra with data. As the message went out, Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had survived, and he was on his way back. But that relief was short-lived. He knew that the Tarkan Dominion would not stop their pursuit. They would regroup and come after him again, but Alex was prepared. He had survived worse. For the next several hours, Alex focused on the long journey home. The Tarkan ships had been left behind, but he couldn't afford to relax yet. He knew that once he reached Zenthra's borders, he would have to deal with the next phase of the mission, delivering the data and preparing for the battle that was about to come. As he neared the edge of Zenthra's space, Alex's mind wandered back to the palace. He thought of Zarella, of her strength and courage, and of the promise he had made to protect her and her people. The war was far from over, but he knew that the information he carried could make a difference. It could save lives, prevent destruction, and perhaps even bring about peace. But only if they acted quickly. He was still miles from home when a warning light on his console flickered. A Tarkan ship had appeared on his sensors, moving fast and directly toward him. Alex's pulse quickened. He had hoped they would give up, but it seemed the Tarkan Dominion wasn't done with him yet. He punched in a series of commands, activating the ship's cloaking system once more. The ship became invisible to the Tarkan ship's sensors, but it wouldn't hold them off forever. The Tarkan ship was gaining on him, and soon it would be able to track him again. Alex's hands gripped the controls tighter as he plotted a new course, trying to evade the pursuing ship. He had been through so much, and the end was within reach. But he couldn't let his guard down now. He had to finish this. His ship shot forward, engines blazing as he pulled ahead of the Tarkhan ship. The battle wasn't over yet, but Alex wasn't about to lose now. He had come too far, and he had something the Tarkhan Dominion desperately needed. That was why they were coming after him, and it was why he had to make it home. As the stars ahead of him began to shine brighter, Alex knew that he was getting closer to safety. He wasn't out of danger yet, but he was close. The battle for Zenthra was just beginning, but with the data he carried, they had a chance to win. He just had to get home. Alex focused on his course, eyes locked on the horizon. The Queen would be waiting, the Princess would be waiting, and soon the battle would begin. But for now, all Alex could do was hold on and push forward, ready to face whatever came next.